We are those guys. We see these guys doing well, but why not those guys? I'm Alex Hardy. He's Nick Ferguson. We're continuing to preview the 2025 NFL season, going division by division. We're still in the NFC, starting with the NFC West, and we've got NFC East. We've got NFC North available for you as we keep going along. So if you're just finding us now, make sure after you wrap up here, you go and listen to the other divisions because, look, we're going to get playoff teams from each. We're going to get some excitement, but along the way, I'm going to have my man, Nick Ferguson, former 10-year NFL safety. What's going on, Nick Ferguson?
What's good, Mr. Alex Hardy? It's time to get into another tidbit about the NFC conference. There's a lot to unpack with that conference going from the West to the South. So let's get into it.
Right. So the West, I'm excited for in particular because it is near and dear to your heart. You played in the AFC West, you played in the AFC South, but you spent time both with the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers. So some unique insight that we'll get to you from a former safety, also a former coach in the National Football League. But let's start with the reigning division champs and a team that, look, they went toe-to-toe with the Philadelphia Eagles. These LA Rams, the second half of the season was kind of defined by efficient play from Matthew Stafford and that offense, but really that young defense kind of coming into its own. They were one of the slowest starters in the league, and then here they are down 28-22 at the 13-yard line. Possibly they had an opportunity to knock out the eventual Super Bowl champs, but that divisional game last year was the closest game Philly had before hoisting that Lombardi. So looking back to 2024 last year, what version of the Rams do you see as we kind of come into this year? The team that started out as rough as they did, or the team that was one of the best offenses and defenses in the NFL the second half of the season?
I'm going to say a team that is kind of a question mark.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that, because the oil that keeps the team on track, and that's their quarterback, Matthew Stafford, that back issue. I mean, he didn't really participate a lot in the preseason, and not in just games, but practices.
Right.
So now, are you talking about Jimmy Garoppolo, Stetson Bennett? And I'll dare to say, even though Jimmy will be playing in a similar offense in Sean McVay as he played with Kyle Shanahan and with the 49ers, I'm still unsure because we remember last time we saw Jimmy in the Super Bowl, he just missed Emmanuel Sanders, which would have put the 49ers ahead of the Kansas City Chiefs. So can Jimmy come in and be a bridge player? Yes. Will that be enough to get them to where they need to get to? Probably not, even knowing as though you got Tyler Higbee, you got Puka Nacua, and you have Devontae Adams. The
Right.
big issue is that their defense. Chris Shula, you mentioned it. You talk about a young defense. To me, watching them in the preseason, even with the acquisition they made, this is not like your top 10 defense. And our offense, they can score points. We know they can do that. You just mentioned how they stood toe-to-toe with the Eagles, but can you stop someone? Can you stop a nosebleed? Can you be some cotton tissue, some Kleenex for your offense? And I don't think the Rams defense can supply that.
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Because Matthew Stafford is the connective tissue that if he's not available, the season falls apart. We'll start with the defense and we'll circle back to Stafford and kind of that offense as well. Look, this was a team that said F them picks, got themselves to a Super Bowl, and really the past couple of years, they've used the draft when they've had first round picks to load up on the defensive side of the football. I mean, it's hard to argue that going with Jared Verse and Brandon Fisk back-to-back picks in the first and the second round, those guys out of Florida State, game wreckers on the defensive line. I mean, Verse was the defensive rookie of the year. And even though he can't go toe-to-toe in an Aaron Donald workout, this is a team that's had to try to rebuild the defense when their best defensive player, the best defensive player in the league, within the last, let's say, decade or so, Aaron Donald no longer there. So that's a huge thing to recover from. They spend the rest of the offseason just trying to shore up and insulate that offense as best as they can, not necessarily at the expense of the defense, but they understand that, look, they had a contentious contract negotiation with Matthew Stafford, and there could have been more money on the table somewhere else, maybe the New York Giants, but they were hoping that the additions of Devontae Adams and making sure that Alaric Jackson, excuse me, at left tackle were re-signed, but so many question marks, and it all falls apart because I laugh. You started to say the last time we saw Jimmy G in the Super Bowl. I thought you were going to bring up the receiver show on Netflix when Devontae was
Yeah,
in
no.
Vegas saying, "I'm trying to get out of here with my before I lose my effing life," talking about hospital balls from Jimmy G. So apparently those guys are copacetic. It's all good now, but there are changes on the defensive end where they get younger. I mentioned the FSU guys, Kobe Turner, Byron Young, Quentin Lake. Shout out the Steeler great Carnell Lake, his kid, roaming that secondary. They've done pretty well using late round picks to shore up the defense and the money allocation, right? All the money's being spent on the offensive side of the ball, so they have to be able to hopefully get this defense back on track. But listen, Matthew Stafford, that epidural, an immortal chamber. These are kind of scary things to see when the Rams weren't really giving us much. And this time a year ago, the same was about Puka Nakua. We ended up only playing a handful of games, and we saw the hit that that took. So there's a lot that we don't know about Stafford in particular, and there's a lot that we don't know about a step in the right direction that this defense is going to take. But that said, they won the division. They're coming back in. There are changes all over the NFC West. I'm not sure if it's as vaunted as it used to be, but we'll kind of get that as we continue to go on through. Um, Expectations for the Rams this year, is the defense that concerning or Matthew Stafford that concerning? Or do you think they're still in the driver's seat after winning last year?
No. I mean, because last year was last year, right? Just think about that. I mean, everything that the Rams did last year is in the rearview mirror. And you said it yourself. When you look around the NFC West, teams have gotten better, not just in that division, but in the conference as a whole. So you have to continue to make sure that your roster development, especially from a young player standpoint, continues to excel. Even with Jared Verse, it's still not enough because you say, well, is he that much of a defensive force like a Von Miller type of guy where he
Mm.
scares the bejesus out of opposing quarterbacks? I don't think he's there yet. And, he's not enough defensively by himself
No.
to actually uplift that defense. And once again, you add Matthew Stafford back being an issue, that's going to be problematic because you mentioned it yourself, and that's really important. Jimmy G in a relationship with Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams, the ball placement has to be exactly where he wants it because he's one of those change of pace types of wide receivers, one of the best route runners in the game right now. And if you don't give it to him on time and rhythm, it's going to be problematic.
So we'll stay in the NFC West, of course. I'm going to just go out on a limb here. They were in last place the previous year in 2024. But tell me about your San Francisco 49ers coming in plagued with injuries, but it's not CMC this time. Nick, before we kind of dive into 2024, 2025, feel free to share the experience that you had working on Kyle Shanahan's staff before they sort of built themselves into a team that, we regularly saw go deep into the playoffs, 2 Super Bowl appearances, kind of your boots on the ground and kind of what you've seen from Kyle Shanahan, knowing that you remember him when he was a young kid running around, playing under his father, Mike Shanahan.
Well, I wouldn't say that he was a young kid. He was definitely in college and old enough, but you could tell he is his father's son, and they built this kind of team from the ground up. And the years I was with the 49ers, they struggled mightily. And you had CJ Beathard, Jimmy Garoppolo, Nick Mullins was the quarterbacks at the time. And Robert Saleh was, I guess, the focal point because it was his defense with Fred Warner, Jimmy Ward, and so many other guys. Richard Sherman being another player that kind of helped uplift that defense and give back the ball to Jimmy Garoppolo and Kyle Shanahan. Now, when you look at the foundation that they have, everything is built on running the ball. Unlike so many other individuals in the pros, if you come from the Shanahan tree, you use the running game to open up the passing game, not vice versa. So that means you're going to have a war chest of running backs. They bring over Brian Robinson, who I think fits this offense as well, considering the fact that CMC has had his injuries over the years. You don't know if he's going to be healthy, but Brian Robinson gives them a guy who can run between the tackles, a guy who can pick up the blitz, a guy who's versatile to catch the ball out of the backfield. So you couple that with Juwan Jennings. You think about Brendan Ayuk, Ricky Pearsall, who I believe is going to be wide receiver one, and George Kittle. It makes the 49ers competitive. Robert Saleh coming back, he's trying to rebuild that defense from the ground up, but it's not going to be what it once was. Even though you have a Bosa on the edge and you have Fred Warner calling the plays and got the green dot on his helmet, it's going to be a rough go for the 49ers. They're going to be competitive, but that Super Bowl window that we always talk about has officially started to close.
Now, I'm of the opinion that Kyle Shanahan asks a lot of his quarterbacks, and Brock Purdy has a ton on his plate in particular. So I understand that paying a quarterback, franchise quarterback money does close that window for you. But at the same time, I think he's worthy of it. And this Brock Purdy is a system quarterback. I'm of the opinion, and you can shed more light on Kyle Shanahan's offense. I think Brock Purdy is the system. He kept them from being one of the worst teams in the National Football League last year due to injury, due to poor play, and a tough schedule. So moving into 2025, the easiest schedule in the NFL by far, right? They face the AFC South, the NFC South this year, plus they have a fourth place schedule. I think that the contract extension has empowered Brock Purdy as opposed to limit or restrict what they're capable of doing. Plus, the money doesn't kick in until next year anyway. So I'm encouraged, but I guess I'm wondering, Nick, like as good as Brock Purdy can be, this is an offense that's banged up right now. You mentioned Brandon Ayuk; he's starting on the pup. Juwan Jennings missed much of the preseason with an injury as well. The running back room too, Garendo, the rookie James, they've all missed time. CMC, really the only healthy running back they have before acquiring Brian Robinson. So is Brock Purdy once again going to be good enough to overcompensate for issues that they have on the health front and kind of a rebuilding defense?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason I say that is because of something you just said, that sometimes it seems like it's taboo to even mention it when you're talking about quarterbacks, but there's nothing wrong with being a system quarterback because what that means is that you're going to keep the offense on time and on rhythm. And I can tell you this about Kyle Shanahan, as though I could tell you about Matt LaFleur, Mike LaFleur, Gary Kubiak, Clint Kubiak. That is what they want. Can you move the chains? Can you keep the offense in
It,
second and manageable?
yeah, but I like Kyle Shanahan asks a lot of him, and there's this ability to be one of the best throwers on the run. Not looking to scramble or bail out, but to use that outside zone to create more room for him to throw. And I just it's something that we never saw Jimmy Garoppolo do. We never saw really any other Shanahan quarterback capable of. So, if he was a first round quarterback, we wouldn't bat an eye. But because he was Mr. Irrelevant, the discourse this offseason was the guy's not worthy of the money. And I just,
Yeah, but
I
okay,
couldn't
but
disagree
okay.
with that.
So see, I push back because think about how the Shanahans feel about Kirk Cousins, right? Kirk Cousins is their prototypical quarterback. That's essentially the comp to Brock Purdy. Can you go out there? Can you execute the offense? I don't want you running all over the place. I want you between the tackles, running play action, under center, delivering the ball, and distributing it to everyone around the field. That's what I need you to do. That's what Kirk Cousins is
Mhm.
capable of doing. And we've seen that. But the one thing about Kirk Cousins, he can't get you to the promised land. Now, Brock Purdy, along with the other offensive attributes, he was able to do that, but he was never able to win it. And that essentially is the issue because
Mhm.
when we talk about Brock Purdy, he's going to keep the offense, on schedule. The only thing is, can he make those off schedule plays when plays break down? And the answer to that question is no. I mean,
Mm.
I'm not trying to throw shade towards Brock Purdy, but it is what it is. He's not a Josh Allen. He's not a Patrick Mahomes. And I would never ask him if I'm his quarterback coach or Kyle Shanahan to be those guys. Do what we ask you to do and we hope that our offense and our run game brings us along. And that is going to have to be enough for them. But will it be enough to overtake some of the other teams in the conference, let alone the division? I say no.
That's totally fair. The 49ers have decided that he's their guy. And really, at this point, with a division that seems a little more wide open, uh, let's find out if he can sustain that kind of success before, those walls are closing in simply because, again, we're talking about a guy who's going to get a bigger piece of the pie. He didn't turn the ball over a ton last year. In the Seahawks organization, though, Nick, a lot of turnover on that offense. You got a new
Yes.
offensive coordinator, play caller. You have a new quarterback. You have a new wide receiver core. You have a brand new interior offensive line, which is great considering they were the worst in the NFL last year. But I look at all this and I have to ask, we'll get into Clint Kubiak because of your familiarity with that Kubiak system. But I mentioned the play caller, the quarterback, the receivers, the offensive line. Is there one spot that I mentioned that's not an upgrade from what this team accomplished in 2024?
Well, I mean, you can look on the defensive side of the ball. They were great last year. They made a couple of additions, but this is now somewhat of a complete team. And I know that sounds absurd to say because we haven't seen them in the regular season, and they have a new offensive coordinator. I'll go back to this: when you take Clint Kubiak and put him back in Minnesota. I mean, he had one, like Kirk Cousins had one of his better statistical years under both Clint Kubiak and Gary Kubiak, and being as though Clint has been in his system all his life. I'm sure his father is consulting him in some way. And don't forget, he spent some time in the San Francisco 49ers organization with Sam Darnold. So
Yep.
this is going to be a relationship or a match made in heaven. Sam Darnold is going to benefit statistically from it. The Seattle Seahawks fans, based on win losses, and also Clint Kubiak. If things go well in this one season, don't be shocked and surprised if come 2026, Clint Kubiak name is mentioned as a possible head coach candidate because you have Elijah Arroyo, who I thought that the Broncos should have selected out of University of Miami. So they move on from Noah Fant. They have him at the tight end position, and
Hmm.
trust me, that dude can stretch the seam. You have Cooper Cup. That dude is a walking first down, and Rams fans may not like it. The Rams moved away from it, thinking that he's injury prone and his age is an issue. I can tell you, he can get open, right? And you need a safety net if you're a quarterback. And then you think about Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. Now you have actual play action. You can run the ball, and you got two physical running backs. And think about what Seattle has always done well, even when Pete was there. They almost like taking a page, literally, out of the Pittsburgh Steelers book, right? And say, well, what do we do well? We execute from a quarterback standpoint. We don't turn the ball over. We run the ball with a two-back system, and we play defense. And that's going to be the recipe for success for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah. Let's stick with the running backs because that was um, you know, indicative of Kenneth Walker's running style in general. It was boom or bust. So they were a bottom five rushing offense in the National Football League last year, and their inability to commit to the run under Ryan Grubb, who's now back with Kalen DeBoer in Alabama. Great story over there, but that was kind of their referendum. And bringing in Clint Kubiak to solidify that running game, to set up the play action, to make life easier for Sam Darnold, who comes in willing to take shots and play well out of play action. I I mean, this offense, look, we talked about Cooper Cup and Sam Darnold and how the passing game was reworked, but tell me how Clint Kubiak and this running game is going to work and why this team could go from a bottom five rushing offense to a top five rushing offense. Because I'm, fantasy standby here. I'm bullish on Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet.
Well, the reason I say that because familiarity. And you got Coach Benson, who spent time in San Francisco when I was there, and he was there with Clint coaching the offensive line. Also, you have Rick Dennison, who was a coach with Mike Shanahan when I was a member of the Denver Broncos, who also, by the way, was a coach with Gary Kubiak, Clint's father, both in Denver and with the Houston Texans. So a lot of familiarity there. We're going to see a lot of that play action under center, outside zone, and that puts a lot of pressure on opposing defense because it forces you to be disciplined with your eyes and with your assignments. And after teams start gashing with the run, to me, all of that goes out the window because you're so tired. That's the
Yeah.
only thing you can think of, and you're not worried about a guy running right past you. So Clint's going to be great for this particular offense, and it's one similar to that Sam Darnold actually has been in his time in Minnesota and with San Francisco.
I'm encouraged. I mean, we talk about the upgrades. The defense has a lot to build off of from last year. So Seattle, we'll get to how we think the division pans out, but I'm curious to see where you are there. Last team, the Arizona Cardinals. I say them for last because even though they finished third, they're one of the teams that I have the most questions about, particularly on the offensive side of the football. How they got there last year. The big addition of Marvin Harrison Jr. It was overall a disappointing season, but frankly, I think they just asked too much of him. There was nothing schemed up for him in Drew Petzing's offense. It went through Trey McBride. Nick Ferguson, how many catches behind the line of scrimmage did Marvin Harrison Jr. have last year?
I'm going to say behind the line of scrimmage, let's say 2.
The same number you and I did. The answer is 0. So they weren't looking to generate easy offense for him. They told the rookie to go. And listen, this could be a credit to the type of player that he was. They lined him up at the X. They parked him outside and said, go separate, go create offense on your own. And the deep shot in particular wasn't really there. That connection between him and Kyler Murray is something that they're searching for in 2025. But for an offense that's so disjointed, I'm curious what you see going forward for the offense and in a big year for Kyler Murray.
It's going to be really difficult because you have, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride being your 2 options, number 1 and number 2. And you think one guy is supposed to be your deep threat, the other guy is your intermediate threat. And for me, you need to have 2 other guys on the field from an outside weapon standpoint because you can run the ball, you can play action. And we know Kyler Murray can make guys miss in the open field, but that's not going to be enough.
Right.
Once again, when you think about what the NFL is or this particular division, the NFC West, it's an arms race. It's like who can get to 35 points the fastest, right? And that's the way that this division is. Will Arizona be a high flying offense as far as putting up point totals? No. They're going to have a couple of games where they put up 24 points and maybe get over 30, but this is not one of those offensive teams that I consider to be a powerhouse in a division that they're in where we're going to say, especially if you look at it from a fantasy standpoint, man, those dudes had outstanding fantasy numbers. No, I mean, McBride may be one of those guys because, he was a monster last season because if I'm
Yep.
not mistaken, he led the team in yards
Yep.
as a tight end.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that tells me
Targets, catches, yards, everything but touchdowns.
so know what that tells me? You're not going down the field on explosive plays that frequently. Everything is 5, 8 to 15 yards.
Mhm. The offensive side of the football, it looks like they're going to run it back. Not a whole lot of changes there. On the defensive side, they tried to address it as best as they could through the draft. 6 of their 7 picks were on defense in the 2025 NFL draft, headlined by the big guys up front, Walter Nolan and Jordan Birch playing up in the middle of the defensive line, and Will Johnson, who, if healthy out of Michigan, could have easily been a first-round pick. So far through the preseason, no setbacks. He looks like a steal with the 47th overall pick. I just didn't see a very inspired defense for last season. Part of it is the offense scoring points, but this defense struggled to get off the field. They actually did pretty well. Top 10 scoring defense, but bottom 10, or I think bottom 12 yards allowed. They were just letting teams stay on the field and they were scoring points, not necessarily touchdowns, but allowing, field goals and not really giving their offense an opportunity to come back on quickly. So I'd like to see that hopefully a little beef up front and a little coverage in the secondary, and this defense can help aid their offense.
Well, I'll say this. Don't be so shocked if there's a point in the season midway And fans are clamoring for Jonathan Gannon's job and saying, well, we don't know if Kyler Murray is our quarter long-term solution at quarterback. Don't be surprised. And I'm not saying that that's going to be a fair assessment to call for either of those guys' jobs, but it's par for the course. You know how this works. And it's unfortunate for them that they happen to be in a division that's countertop heavy with talent, and they're just a void of it.
Choo, choo, choo. The answer is always explosives. He's Nick
Yes.
Ferguson. I'm Alex Hardy. Again, thrilled to be with you guys. We are those guys. Hey, you see these guys over there? How about those guys? You can find us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to see us audio, video, feel free to like, rate, and subscribe. We will be back with the NFC South before kicking things over to the AFC. And hey, we're just getting ready for the start of the season. Until we meet again, Nick Ferguson, what do you have to say to the people?
Donuts are better when you warm them up.
Facts. We are those guys. Hey, you see these guys? They're doing well. Hey, how about those guys? I'm Alex Hardy. He's Nick Ferguson, former 10-year NFL safety. And we're here to bring you the NFC South, previewing every single division before the 2025 season kicks off. I want to get right underway here, Nick. And look, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, believe it or not, they have been the picture-perfect image of consistency. How many
Right.
teams move on from the greatest of all time, continue to stack division titles, and look like they haven't skipped a beat? Well, it hasn't been my New England Patriots, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have done it. So, what do you think about so much turnover with this squad, and yet they keep continuing to do it, Nick?
Well, that goes back to Todd Bowles' coaching staff and their development of their players. But most importantly, you go back to the guy who was kicked to the curb in Cleveland, spent a week with the Rams, and everyone's thinking, okay, well, this guy
You
is
missed
a
the
bust.
Panthers,
Oh, I'm
kicked off
sorry.
by the
That's right.
Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, I want to kind of forget the Panthers in a way. But
Not
yeah,
today, not when we're previewing them.
so we're talking about Baker Mayfield, and as long as Baker is playing with that confidence that we've always seen him play with and that type of attitude, and that's the one thing that I love about watching Baker play. Baker doesn't give two craps about anyone and what they think of him. And some people may say, well, that's arrogant. You don't want that in your quarterback. Nope, I want that in my quarterback because there's going to come a point in the game or the season where I'm going to need him to step up and show that moxie and have that 2-minute drive, right? I go back to Baker when he was with the Rams and he had just got there and they had a
Yep.
Thursday night game. He came in 2-minute offense and they let it fly. And you can say that he made a lot of one read throws. Yes, he did, but he created a lot of energy and enthusiasm. And that's what Baker supplies with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And if they can kind of keep the defense on par with what the offense is capable of doing, this is a team that should win the division again. Because last year they finished the division, if I'm not mistaken, 10-7, right?
Yep.
And being 10-7, obviously you want to get more wins, but you're in a division where you're pretty much the top dog in that division in the South. What other team is better right now, and no games are played, better than Tampa Bay, even though they have some young receivers?
No, we're projecting a lot with every other team in the South, but we kind of know what we have in the Buccaneers. And look, we know that we have Baker coming off a career high 71.5% completion percentage, a career high 4,500 passing yards, a career high 8 yards per attempt, a career high 41 touchdowns, a career high 378 yards rushing. I don't want to just copy and paste those stats for next year. That's not how it works, Nick. But for a team that had everything go right for them last year, already coming into 2025, we talked about the consistency despite the turnover, right?
Right.
Brady to Baker, the offensive line turnover. We're seeing it on the defense as well. But at offensive coordinator and play caller, Todd Bowles has been there 4 years. This is his fourth offensive play caller. We're now on to Josh Grizzard after Liam Cohen left this past offseason. kind of contentiously, right, to go to Jacksonville. It was Dave Canales the year before
Duval.
that. It was Byron Leftwich when he first got there off of the Brady Super Bowl. So
Oh.
it is just fascinating to see how the gears keep turning. And you talked about the development of the players under Todd Bowles, but you have to give credit for the play calling as well because you expect a dip every time you move on from a different guy. And look, Baker had a career season, and we're watching uh, Dave Canales kind of. We'll get to the Panthers shortly here. I know you don't want to, but I was kind of encouraged by what I saw. But everything was perfect for them last year. Already, Tristan Wirfs and Chris Godwin avoid the pup list, but they're gonna miss time. Um, you know, I'm sort of curious. Reports had come out that they passed their physicals, which I find hard to believe,
Yeah.
considering Godwin turned down was something like 15 or $20 million from New England and doesn't look like he's going to play the first month of the year. We'll see, but I think this is one of the bigger challenges that the Buccaneers have had year over year, missing Wirfs, missing Chris Godwin, Jalen McMillan set to miss significant time too. But look, they had turnover on that offensive line. They lost Carlton Davis on that defense. He leaves for New England. And, the vets like Levante David are getting a year older. So I'm i- interested to see how yet again they can defy the expectation that, well, maybe there's some drop off because they're not, they don't have the same people that got them 10-7 in a division victory last year. So maybe we have them winning the division. Maybe we don't because of what the Atlanta Falcons look like they're doing. And my question for you, Nick, last year, 2024, how can a team live with one foot in the present and one foot looking toward the future? 1 year later, how do you think the Falcons have recovered or navigated signing Kirk Cousins to a lucrative $100 million contract and using Michael Penix with the top 10 pick in the draft?
Well, it looks like the Falcons and their front office made a humongous mistake. Now you can say, well, if you had to go to your backup quarterback, it's not Desmond Ritter. It's a guy who's played a lot of games in the league. So you have a safety net in that regard, but we still have to remember we're still talking about Kirk Cousins, a guy who's put up a lot of gaudy numbers, but hasn't been able to win some of the bigger games. And the reason being because the majority of the teams he's been on, they've been trailing. So
Yep.
now they have to throw the ball. But this is a difficult situation because now you thought that Kirk Cousins was going to be the guy, right? You gave him this large deal, and you kind of bought into him, you tied to him, but you did it right after you drafted, or you did it right before drafting a guy like Michael Penix.
No.
Now the keys to the car have been handed to Penix. Now Penix still is one of those guys. He's got a strong arm, but lacks mobility, right? That's going to be a major issue for this offense. Whether it's Kirk Cousins at some point because Penix is not looking the way that they projecting him to look, which I think he will because now he's had this first offseason being the proverbial guy. But it goes back to, can you throw it? With Drake London, their tight end, and Bijan, you can throw it, you can run it with the best of them. But it comes back to this for me being a defensive guy. Can you stop someone? And I'm not sure that the Falcons, once again, can stop other teams at a higher rate than they're going to be expected to score points.
But Nick, I just want to talk about the offense. Defensively, they leveraged again 1 foot in the past, sorry, 1 foot in the present, 1 foot in the future. Right? They leveraged their future. They got a pair of pass rushers. They took Jalen Walker and they got James Pierce Jr. In the first round of the draft. They gave up their first round pick in 2026 to move up to 26th overall to get a guy they felt shouldn't have been there at that point of the draft, right? So a pair of rookie edge rushers should help. It should help that secondary led by your guy Jesse Bates. And, and I just the defense has as many question marks, I think, than the offense does. I just one hand needs to shake the other. It's kind of a similar conversation, that we had when we were talking about the Arizona Cardinals when we did our NFC West preview, which, by the way, if you want to listen to that, you go to our YouTube, our podcast stream. It's the episode just before this one. I don't have any confidence or assurance that the Falcons defense will get them off the field. But frankly, you got a big arm in Michael Penix. You've got weapons. You mentioned Bijan and Drake London. Like, look, a couple shootouts didn't hurt anybody, did they, Nick?
No, they didn't hurt anyone, but being able to win the games late. We watched Michael Penix go against Jaden Daniels, and the Falcons had an opportunity to really win that game and upset Jaden Daniels at home. But they couldn't make the plays that they needed when they needed to make them. Obviously, there was some coaching issues as far as
Yeah.
timeouts were concerned, but still at the same time, I mean, you talked about the Falcons defense and that being a question mark. They so much of a question mark, even though they have some young pass rushers. If this was a Batman movie, the Falcons defense would be the Riddler because we don't know who they are. We don't know what they're going to do, right? So it's kind of like, riddle me this. Are we going to stop anyone today? So when your defense can't really slow people down, that's going to force Michael Penix to press. And we know what happens when young quarterbacks press, force turnovers. And you can't give a short field to the opposing offense, and you can't have takeaways that lead to points. Can't do it.
No, I mean, look, they averaged over 30 points a game in those 3 starts Penix had to end last year, but the record was 1-2. So your point is well taken, Nick Ferguson. Meanwhile, the Carolina Panthers, I knew you didn't want to do this, but here we are. We started talking Dave Canales and his time as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coordinator 2 years ago. But honestly, Nick, in his first season, it looked like things were starting off just as poorly as they did the year prior, but with Frank Reich. But now Doug Peterson, Frank Reich, I always get them mixed up. Was it one? Was it both of them? I think it was Reich.
It was Frank Reich.
It was Frank Reich. I was right the
Yeah.
first time. However, you go to the second half of the season, and the play had picked up. Bryce Young, by the way, between the first 8 games and the second 8 games of the season, it improved completion percentage, added 1.5 yards per attempt, and he had a 13 touchdown, 4 interception ratio with a passer rating that, again, first half of the season was hovering around 60 to 90 for the second half of the year. Look, I'm encouraged by it. They added weapons and beefed up the offensive line around him. I mean, how soon before we reopen this draft debate of Bryce Young versus CJ Stroud, given how the Texans performed last year?
Well, it's a little different because in Bryce Young's defense, well, he doesn't have the same weapons as CJ Stroud, right? He's not the same size as CJ Stroud. So that plays a major role because we can't talk about the success of either quarterback without encompassing the overall roster within itself, because
Of course.
that's a huge part of it. And it's almost like Bryce Young, even though he's a first round draft choice for the Carolina Panthers, every game I watch, it's like he's playing with one hand tied behind his back, right? He can't really get a lot of support from Chuba Hubbard in the run game, not consistently. And
Hmm.
then it goes back to weapons. Who do you have at the tight end position? Who do you have at the X and the Z? Can they beat man coverage? Can they sit down in the zone? Can they make those 50-50 catches? And Adam Thielen is one of those veteran guys, but once again, he's a veteran guy. His best years, no insult to him, but his best years are behind him. Can he get free? And there was a guy that I thought would be an excellent compliment to Adam Thielen, and that was Hunter Renfrow. Well,
Yep.
they cut him,
Yep.
right? They cut third and Renfrow. To me, you need a safety net. You need an outlet. As a Patriots fan, you understand this. Think about Julian Edelman, right? Danny Amendola. Those were safety nets for your guy, Tom Brady. Bryce Young doesn't have that. If you want to tell me that there's a guy, please tell me.
Well, they're putting a lot of it on Tedero McMillan, the 8th overall selection. Look, he was essentially picked here to lift the rest of the offense. I mean, for 2 years, Adam Thielen seemed to be the only guy who could get open. Xavier Legette had those moments, but this is a Panthers team that if he holds onto the football, they upset the Philadelphia Eagles. And potentially shake up, how the NFC playoff standings were. But McMillan, I think, is someone they're going to ask a lot of. You know, back to the Arizona Cardinals comparison we gave, I'm sort of worried they may just park him out there like Marvin Harrison and ask him to win. I
Yeah.
expect more from Dave Canales to kind of scheme open looks. And even though he's parked on the outside as an X, maybe give him some opportunities as a power slot. But I'm thinking having one receiver, maybe two receivers that can create some separation would sort of untie that hand that you said Bryce Young has tied behind his back. Look, an eighth overall pick wide receiver can only do so much for an offense. The additions that they made in the interior of the offensive line this past offseason, paired with the spending spree that they did a year ago with Robert Hunt at the guard position. I'm thinking that it's a more sustainable infrastructure for Bryce Young than what he was used to, certainly in his rookie season and even the first half of last year before they built up, the continuity and the familiarity with that offense. It's just, look, sometimes a complicated offense that can be carried out by the likes of Tom Brady and Baker Mayfield takes a year or two to adjust. I mean, we talked about Ben Johnson, the NFC North. Look, a team that has a quality and capable play caller. They're entering year two. Bryce Young entering year three. I can see some optimism with this offense, but only because we're not talking about winning games. We're kind of talking fantasy football here because I have absolutely no confidence in that defense whatsoever. You
Well,
know,
let me give you an idea of what it's like playing quarterback for the Carolina Panthers for a guy like Bryce Young. So, like I told you, imagine this. He's playing with one hand tied behind his back while standing in a potato sack and
oh, it
trying
gets
to get
worse. It
and
gets
trying
worse now.
yes, and trying to use his offhand to work a Rubik's Cube. There it is.
Look,
I just
Jake
gave
look,
yes.
Jake Plummer was capable of throwing that left-handed pass. I mean, maybe Bryce Young could do it too. I don't know.
Listen,
I
it's
I
it's
love Plums. I love you. I love your guy.
I love Plum too, but it's hard being a quarterback when you don't really have that many weapons and everyone is looking at you, especially if you're a first round pick. They're looking at you as being the savior of the franchise.
Right.
They want you to take and the organization from Clark Kent to damn Superman. You know how difficult that is when you don't have the Justice League around you and your opponents have 11 guys looking at you that have kryptonite on their helmet? That's very difficult, Alex. That's very difficult.
I'm not denying it. I'm going to be optimistic that look, everything starts at the top, and we know David Tepper's temper, but
Yes.
I'm just going to be optimistic here and hope that it's not the same old Carolina Panthers. Rounding things out, it is the same old New Orleans Saints. Here's a team that needs to be looking toward the future, but instead, Mickey Loomis is living in the present. Like this is a team that needs to rebuild, has needed to rebuild, needs to get multiple dead cap money dollars off of their salary cap. And instead, they draft the 26-year-old rookie quarterback that's now they're going to be their backup. And then they trade a fourth round and a seventh round pick for a 27-year-old wide receiver from Sean Payton, who apparently still runs this organization. Look, I like Kellen Moore a lot. I'm going to ask some questions about his offense compared to what we saw with Clint Kubiak, which his offense we covered extensively when we did the NFC West preview. But Nick, I just don't get it with Mickey Loomis and just eating all this dead money while refusing to get, in a sense, any bit younger.
Well, when you think about it, the Saints have been fleeced on this twice. And it's funny you bring up, Coach Payton, because when you think about what that salary was like for the players on the roster, I mean, it was almost like they had an Air Max card and they just kept swiping, swiping. Ah, don't worry about it. We'll kick that can down the street. Swipe, swipe, swipe. And now Sean Payton is in Denver with the richest owners in professional football, and he doesn't have to worry about that. Could you imagine being able to go on a shopping spree for players, swipe the credit card? You don't have to worry about the debt. You don't have to worry about the interest. That's on Mickey Loomis. And oh, by the way, you realize that, you know what? They don't have any big wide receivers. And you have a conversation with Mickey. Say, hey, Mickey, remember those days when we were with the Saints and we had Marcus Colston, Michael Thomas, man, it would look great if you guys had a big 6'4" type of receiver. You know what? We happen to have a guy named Devon Vele. Why don't you say that we sit down and we chop it up and you give us a fourth and a seventh for a late round pick? Does that sound nice? Using the Jedi mind trick. And Mickey
Yep.
goes, yes, yes. So now reliving in the past, you can't rekindle that. The years are gone. There's no Drew Brees. There's no Deuce McAllister, right? There's no Mark Ingram, but you're living in the past, and then you're doing it with a head coach who is a rookie head coach, albeit he's coming off a successful Super Bowl victory with the
Yep.
Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, you put Kellen Moore in a tight spot.
Kellen Moore was the 32nd head coach named, right? They were the last team to announce their head coach, large in part because, they hired him off of the Super Bowl win. They had to wait to do that. They also became the 32nd team to name their starting quarterback this year. I'm not going to say it's totally related. I'm not going to say they're unprepared, but I guess my question with Kellen Moore taking over for Clint Kubiak, he has announced that this team is going to play with pace. That's something that we saw the Eagles do. We saw the Chargers do when he was there, and certainly the Dallas Cowboys. What does more plays on a bad offense mean, Nick Ferguson?
Well, you just hope that more plays mean that your defense is playing better against the run than they've done in the previous year, because that was an issue when Dennis Allen was the head coach. They really couldn't slow people down. Listen, I watched the Broncos, a team that was struggling running the ball on Thursday night between Javonte Williams, who had I believe 88 yards, and
Yeah.
then you had another 60, 70 yards from Bo Nix. So if you're telling me that you're getting Kellen Moore and Spencer Rattler, who's now the starting quarterback, more opportunities, that means that the defense is playing better. You've gotten on track with Alvin Kamara in the run and the passing game with the screen game that is. And then Chris Olave, he's healthy. Brandon
Yep.
Cooks, right? He's
Yeah,
taking the
Rashid
top.
Shaheed, healthy,
Yes,
hopefully, as well.
exactly. So now you're telling me all of those things are working well for the New Orleans Saints. I find that really hard to believe because it goes back to how much faith do you have in Spencer Rattler? That's what it comes down to.
Well, yeah, apparently enough to keep him there. You mentioned Desmond Ritter. It kind of smells of that type of situation that the Falcons went through. Like, we're confident we spent a second round pick. You know, I I'm worried. But like I said, the future is bright, Nick. They're only set to spend, as of right now, the 2026 salary cap. They're only $25 million over the cap going into next year. So it's all peaches and cream. It's rosy for New Orleans.
Well, it sounds that way, but remember, we're not too many years far removed from the Saints fans wearing paper bags over their faces, right? Now, the ghost of Sean Payton's past and Drew Brees' past, they're not walking through that Mercedes-Benz stadium. They're not. So it's going to be on, Spencer Rattler, Tyler Shuck, and Kellen Moore to kind of put this offense and this organization back in the mainstream conversation. For me, I don't know if they're gonna be able to do it this year, but for me now, we're looking forward to 2026 and 2027 for this team. So if you were to ask me, well, how things are gonna work out, where the Saints are gonna finish, for right now, I'm gonna put them as a 14 in the NFC South.
Yep, I agree with you there. Let's go bottom up, Nick. Who's third in the NFC South for you?
You know what? I think it might be the Carolina Panthers. Yeah, I think it
Okay.
might be the Carolina Panthers.
Let's get spicy. I'll put the Falcons there. I'll put the Panthers
Oh.
second, just because they go 2-0 against Atlanta. And do you have the Falcons overtaking the Tampa Bay, or are the Buccaneers going to run it back and win another NFC South
No,
title?
no, no. Atlanta's gonna make it interesting, because they have Bijan and they have Drake London. But I think it's for, second year in a row is gonna be Baker, Todd Bowles, and Mike Evans walking away with that title.
I think more than anybody else, Drake London is the guy I hope to have in every league for fantasy. I know I won't. So I think my realistic answer is if I can get him in every single league, and it's possible that I can do it, Emeka Ibuka. That's what I'm thinking.
All right, from Tampa Bay.
I like those Bucks. I like the opportunity with a couple of injured wide receivers and the pedigree. Those Ohio State guys, Nick. You know how it is. He's Nick Ferguson. I'm Alex Hardy. That wraps up the NFC. We have the South that we just completed. You can listen to the other episodes where we cover the other NFC teams. And hey, coming up, we're going to do the AFC. Probably start in your AFC West, Nick. I mean, we'll hash that out later. But I just had a thought that at least for now, the AFC West is going to be all about a certain happening, an occurrence that took place this this week. We have an incredible announcement: Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce getting engaged.
Not you too.
So
Not you too.
listen, I think I have a couple takes on this. First of all, I think every guy who's a casual football fan that isn't married already, sweating bullets. If they're in a committed relationship and their girlfriends are big Taylor Swift fans, they are sweating bullets right now. If Taylor Swift, whose entire career is based off of writing songs off of breakups and scorned ex-lovers, and she found her person, that somebody's going to have to go ring shopping. My other take, what an incredible, unlikely combo that absolutely worked out. You know, you would never expect, how'd she put it, the English teacher and the gym teacher getting married like this. So, Nick, off the top of your head here, I'm curious, before we wrap up and get on out of here, your 2 or 3 unlikely combos, unlikely duos that just absolutely get it right.
Well, first of all, being a comic book fan, I'm gonna say Batman and Superman, right?
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
we know how much Batman opposed the godlike image of Superman, and the other one is bananas and peanut butter. How about that?
Honestly, I was gonna say peanut butter and jelly, but I'll man, I have so many thoughts. I'm not as big of a DC or a comic book guy as you are,
Yeah.
but it disappoints me to no end that Ben Affleck, as Batman, said his greatest power was being incredibly rich. He's the greatest detective. You know, as many superpowers as Superman has, you know, Bruce Wayne's ability to deduct and use reasoning as a detective, that is truly his superpower. And I won't use peanut butter and jelly, but I think an unlikely combo would just be like salty and sweet in general. Like the idea that, putting salt on a chocolate chip cookie or being able to mix certain things that, you get the savory and the sweetness to it, just absolutely hits. I've got 2 more for you. There's, of course, Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart.
Of course.
Unlikely duo that just absolutely crushed it no matter what the venue is. And you know what? As a Boston guy, Aerosmith and Run DMC, Walk This Way.
Okay. Unlikely pair.
Unlikely pair, but just,
Yeah.
recharge Aerosmith's career and, allowed Run DMC to expose themselves to, an audience for my kind of complexion.
Okay, well, I got another one for you. What about what was it? Miley Cyrus' father. Um, I
Billy
don't get.
Ray and Lil Nas X.
There you go. There you go.
Well,
You know it,
let's
man.
not check in on Lil Nas right now. There's some things going on in his
No,
life.
no. Someone needs to check in on him. No. Someone holler at him. Hey,
Hey,
get him off those
hey,
California streets.
you check in on him, and you guys check in on those guys. Right, like, rate, subscribe. Please check us out, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to continue to preview the season before 2025 kicks off, and then throughout the season, we're going to continue to update each week all the action, injuries, trades, fantasy football, whatever you guys ask for, we're here for it. Nick, you also have the ability to break down film. We'll take a very close, in-depth look at certain plays that jump out to you on a week-to-week basis. But I got some other fun things in store. So that's right. Later, we're getting to the AFC. You can go back to the other NFC previews that we have. So I'm just pumped, thrilled to be back with you. Let's get Taylor out of here, and let's make it about us for just another moment here. So Nick, before we get on out of here, what do you have for the people?
Make sure you wash your fruit before you eat it.
Well, I mean, that's a no-brainer. I do baking soda with it as well.
Okay. Not everyone washes their fruit. Just think about it.
Leave it in a bowl for like 10, 15 minutes. Not for too long because then it gets soggy. Put a little bit of baking soda in there, and then you rinse it off. That's how you do it.
Well, there it is.